The alien warrior cried for mercy. What the human did next shocked the galaxy asterisk. When enemies meet in the ruins, battle had raged for 3 days across the scorched plains of Kepler 442b. Lieutenant Jake Morrison crouched behind twisted metal debris, his rifle smoking in his hands. The war between humans and the Vorthic Empire had reached its bloodiest point. Bodies of both species littered the battlefield like broken dolls scattered by an angry child. Jake peered through the haze of smoke and ash. His unit had been separated during the last bombardment. He was alone, deep in enemy territory, with nothing but his training and a half-empty ammunition clip. The silence felt wrong after hours of constant gunfire. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. That's when he heard it. A soft whimper, barely audible above the crackling of distant fires. Jake's finger tightened on his trigger as he crept forward. The sound came again, weaker this time. Behind a collapsed transport vehicle, he found her. The Vorthic warrior lay pinned beneath a chunk of burning metal. Her chitinous armor was cracked and bleeding a strange purple fluid. Her 4 arms were twisted at impossible angles, and her large compound eyes flickered with pain. Jake had never seen a Vorthic up close before. They were supposed to be monsters, killing machines bred for war, but this one was crying. "Please," she whispered in broken English, her voice like wind through broken glass. "Help me." Jake's training screamed at him to pull the trigger. She was the enemy. Her kind had glassed human colonies, turned children into ash, and shown no mercy to anyone who stood in their way. His own brother had died on Proxima Station when the Vorthic fleet arrived. He should end her suffering with a single shot and move on. Instead, he lowered his weapon. The warrior's name was Zixthara, though she told him to call her Zix. As Jake worked to free her from the debris, she spoke in short, pained sentences. She had been a frontline soldier for 12 cycles, fighting because that was what her caste demanded. She had never questioned orders, never hesitated to kill humans in battle. "But I have never been helpless before," she admitted as Jake bandaged her wounds with strips torn from his uniform. "My people, they do not help the wounded. The weak are left to die. It is our way." Jake paused in his work. "That's not the human way." "Why?" Zix asked, her compound eyes focusing on his face with difficulty. "Why do you help me? I would have killed you if our positions were reversed." Jake thought about his brother, about all the friends he had lost to her kind. The hatred still burned in his chest like molten iron. But looking at this broken creature, he found something else competing with that anger. Something his drill sergeants had never trained him for. "Because you asked?" he said simply. As night fell over the battlefield, Jake shared his rations with Zix. She couldn't eat human food, but she was grateful for the water. They talked in whispers, afraid that patrols from either side might find them. Zix told him about her home world, about crystal cities that sang in the wind and gardens that glowed with bioluminescent flowers. "It sounds beautiful," Jake said. "It was," Zix replied. Before the war consumed everything, Jake understood. Earth had been beautiful too, before the orbital bombardments turned forests into glass and oceans into steam. War had a way of destroying the things worth fighting for. When Zix fell asleep, Jake kept watch. He could have left her there, should have left her there. But something had changed in those few hours. The enemy had become a person with a name, with memories, with pain that mirrored his own. In the distance, he could see the lights of a human patrol approaching. Soon, he would have to make a choice that would define not just his future, but perhaps the future of 2 species locked in endless war. As dawn broke over the ruins, Jake Morrison made a decision that would shock the galaxy. The choice that changed everything. The human patrol consisted of 5 soldiers led by Sergeant Maria Santos, A veteran with steel in her eyes and scars mapping her face like a roadmap of battles fought. She found Jake sitting beside the wounded Vorthik, his rifle laid across his knees, his expression unreadable. "Morrison," Santos barked, her weapon trained on Zix. "Step away from the alien, now." Jake didn't move. "She's wounded, Sergeant. She can't fight." "It's a trick," Private Tommy Chun whispered, his young face pale with fear. "They're shapeshifters, mind readers. My cousin told me before he shipped out to Titan." "Your cousin was wrong," Jake said calmly. "She's just scared." Santos circled them slowly, never taking her eyes off Zix. The alien warrior had awakened when the patrol arrived, but made no move to flee or fight. She simply watched the humans with those multifaceted eyes that reflected the morning light like broken mirrors. "You know what these things did to Colony 7? Santos asked. "Cooked every man, woman, and child alive with plasma fire. Left nothing but shadows burned into walls." Jake's jaw tightened. "I know what they've done. I also know what we've done to them. So you're defending them now?" Santos demanded. "I'm defending her," Jake corrected. "One individual who asked for help." The standoff stretched like a taut wire. Other soldiers shifted nervously, fingers on triggers. Zix remained perfectly still, understanding that her life hung by a thread thinner than spider silk. Finally, Santos lowered her weapon slightly. "Command wants all Vorthik prisoners transported to the research facility on Luna Base for interrogation." "Torture, you mean," Jake said. "Intelligence gathering," Santos replied coldly. "Every piece of information could save human lives." Zix spoke for the first time since the patrol arrived, her voice barely above a whisper. "I will tell you what I know freely. But please, do not let them cut me apart like the others." The admission hung in the air like smoke. Even Santos looked taken aback. Intelligence reports had mentioned rumors of human prisoners being dissected alive, but hearing it confirmed by the enemy herself was different. "The others?" Santos asked, despite herself. "3 of my clutchmates were captured on Kepler 186b, Zix explained. "The transmissions we intercepted." The screaming went on for days. Private Chun lowered his weapon, looking sick. "Jesus Christ." Santos studied Jake's face, then Zix's broken form. After 20 years of service, she had learned to read situations quickly. This wasn't a trap or a trick. It was something far more dangerous. It was genuine. "If I call this in," Santos said slowly, "they'll want her alive for questioning. But if she died from her injuries during transport ... Jake met her eyes. "I won't let you kill her." "I'm not talking about killing her, Morrison. I'm talking about making a choice between following orders and doing what's right." The patrol exchanged glances. These were soldiers who had seen too much death, lost too many friends. They were tired of war, tired of hate, tired of following orders that turned them into monsters. "There's a medical outpost 12 clicks south," Santos said finally. "Neutral zone, run by the Galactic Red Cross. If she happened to stumble in there on her own ... Jake understood." "What about our reports?" "We found evidence of a Vorthik patrol, but no survivors," Santos replied. "The blast signatures suggest they were caught in their own artillery fire." As the patrol prepared to leave, Santos pulled Jake aside. "This is bigger than one alien, Morrison. If word gets out that you showed mercy to a Vorthik warrior, it could change everything. Some will call you a traitor. Others might call you a hero. I'm neither," Jake said. "I'm just a man who couldn't walk away from someone in pain." Santos nodded slowly. "Maybe that's exactly what this galaxy needs." 2 hours later, Jake helped Zix into an abandoned medical transport. Her injuries were stabilized, but she would need proper treatment soon. As they drove through the wasteland toward the neutral zone, she asked him the question that had been, burning in her mind. What will happen to you when your leaders learn of this? Jake stared at the road ahead, littered with the wreckage of war. I don't know, but I know I can sleep at night. Behind them, the battlefield grew smaller in the rear view. Mirror. Ahead lay uncertainty, consequences, and the possibility that one act of mercy might plant a seed of change in a galaxy. Consumed by hate, neither of them knew that their story was already spreading through encrypted communications channels, carried by soldiers who had witnessed something they had never seen before, an enemy choosing compassion over vengeance. When mercy becomes revolution, the Galactic Red Cross outpost was a white dome rising from red sand like a pearl in dried blood. Dr. Elizabeth Reeves, a woman whose hands had healed both human and alien wounds without discrimination, watched. Through her office window as a battered transport approached, she had been expecting them. Word traveled fast in wartime, especially when that word carried hope instead of horror. Jake helped Zix from the vehicle, supporting her weight as she limped toward the medical facility. Her purple blood had soaked through the makeshift bandages, but her compound eyes remained alert and grateful. You made it, Dr. Reeves said, rushing out with a medical team. Bring her to Surgical Bay 3. We've prepared everything. As the medical team took over, Jake found himself alone in the waiting area. The silence felt strange after days of constant tension. He closed his eyes, wondering if he had made the right choice or simply delayed the inevitable. Hours passed. Dr. Reeves emerged from surgery, looking tired but satisfied. She'll live. The damage was extensive, but her species has remarkable healing capabilities. She's asking for you. Jake found Zix in a private room, her broken limbs now properly set and stabilized. Medical scanners hummed quietly in the background, monitoring her vital signs. Thank you, she said when she saw him. For everything. Don't thank me yet, Jake replied. When command finds out what happened, there'll be consequences. Zix struggled to sit up despite her injuries. Then we must make those consequences matter. Before Jake could ask what she meant, the room's communication system crackled to life. Dr. Reeves' voice filled the space, urgent and concerned. Jake, you need to see the news feeds. Something's happening. In the common area, a dozen screens showed breaking news from across human space. The story of a human soldier showing mercy to a wounded Vorthic warrior had leaked. But it hadn't come from military channels. It had come from Zix herself. During her surgery, while unconscious from anesthesia, her implanted communication device had automatically transmitted her recent memories to the Vorthek command network. Every moment of Jake's kindness, every word of compassion, had been broadcast across the enemy fleet. I'm sorry, Zix whispered when she saw Jake's shocked expression. The implant activates during medical procedures. I couldn't control it. But the transmission had done something unprecedented. Across the Vorthic Empire, soldiers were seeing their human enemies not as faceless monsters, but as individuals capable of mercy. Some were questioning orders. Others were refusing to fire on human medical transports. The human response was equally dramatic. News networks were calling Jake everything from a traitor to a saint. Protesters filled the streets of Earth's major cities, some demanding his execution, others hailing him as a hero who had shown the galaxy what humanity really stood for. Admiral Patricia Kong, the highest-ranking officer in the human fleet, appeared on emergency broadcasts. Her face was stern, her voice measured. Lieutenant Morrison's actions were unauthorized and dangerous. However, they have created an opportunity that we cannot ignore. Jake watched in amazement as the Admiral continued. The Vorthic High Command has requested a temporary ceasefire. They want to discuss prisoner exchanges and medical aid for wounded combatants. This is the first time in 12 years of war that they have initiated diplomatic contact. Dr. Reeves. placed a hand on Jake's shoulder. "You did something extraordinary, son. You reminded two species that their enemies have names, faces, and families. But not everyone was celebrating. Military hardliners on both sides denounced the ceasefire as weakness. Radical human groups called for Jake's court-martial. Vorthic extremists labeled Zix a traitor who had been corrupted by human influence. This is dangerous, Jake said, watching reports of riots on Earth and similar unrest on Vorthic worlds. People are dying because of what I did. People were already dying, Zix replied from her wheelchair, having insisted on joining them despite her injuries. Now they're dying for something different, for the possibility of peace instead of the certainty of war. As if summoned by her words, the communication system announced an incoming priority transmission. Admiral Kong's face appeared on the main screen, flanked by officials Jake didn't recognize. "Lieutenant Morrison," the Admiral said formally, "you and the Vorthic prisoner designated Zix Thara are hereby ordered to report to Central Command immediately. The Galactic Council has agreed to oversee preliminary peace negotiations, and both sides have requested your presence." Jake felt the weight of history settling on his shoulders. "Admiral, I'm not a diplomat. I'm just a soldier who made a choice." "Sometimes, Lieutenant, that's exactly what the galaxy needs," Kong replied. "Someone who makes choices based on conscience, rather than protocol." As the transmission ended, Jake looked at Zix. Her alien features were difficult to read, but he thought he saw something like hope in those compound eyes. "Are you ready to change the galaxy?" she asked. Jake picked up his rifle, checking the power cell out of habit. Then, after a moment's hesitation, he set it aside. "I guess we'll find out." Outside the medical facility, a transport waited to carry them to Central Command, where representatives of two warring species would attempt something that had seemed impossible just days before, talking instead of shooting. The war was far from over, but for the first time in 12 years, there was a chance it might end with words instead of bodies. The trial that shook. Two World Central Command occupied an entire asteroid between human and Vorthic space, its massive structure, a testament to humanity's engineering prowess. Jake had never seen anything like it. Kilometers of gleaming metal and crystal, bristling with defensive systems and communication arrays. The transport docked with barely a whisper. Jake helped Zix from her medical stretcher, noting how she moved with more confidence despite her injuries. The past week of recovery had strengthened her resolve as much as her body. "Nervous?" he asked as they walked through corridors lined with representatives from dozens of species. The Galactic Council in all its diverse glory. "Terrified," Zix admitted, "but also hopeful. Is that strange?" "These days, I'm not sure what's strange anymore." Fleet Admiral Patricia Kong met them at the main conference hall, her expression unreadable. Behind her stood General Harrison Blake, a man whose reputation for ruthlessness preceded him like a storm front. "Morrison," Blake growled, "do you have any idea what you've unleashed?" "Sir, 3 human colonies have declared independence rather than continue fighting. 2 Vorthic border fleets have gone rogue, refusing orders to attack civilian targets. The entire military structure of both species is fracturing because one soldier decided to play medic." Admiral Kong raised a hand for silence. "What General Blake is trying to say, Lieutenant, is that your actions have created a crisis that could either end this war or make it infinitely worse." They entered the hall where representatives from 50 different species sat in a massive circle. At the center stood 2 podiums, one for Jake, one for Zix. The weight of 1,000 eyes pressed down on them like gravity from a collapsed star. The session began with formal statements from both military commands. Jake listened to recitations of casualty figures, strategic assessments, and political ramifications. Numbers and statistics that reduced 12 years of suffering to data points on charts. Then it was his turn to speak. "I'm not a politician or a philosopher," Jake began, his voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. "I'm a soldier who found someone in pain and couldn't walk away. That's all." "That's not all," interrupted Ambassador Vextai of the Crystalline Confederation, her voice like singing crystal. "Your actions have demonstrated something we thought impossible, that humans and Vorthik could see each other as individuals, rather than species." Zix rose carefully to her feet, her healing wounds still visible beneath her ceremonial armor. When she spoke, her words carried across the hall with surprising strength. "For 12 cycles, I killed humans because I was told they were monsters. I believed this because I had never spoken to one, never seen one show kindness, never witnessed what this human calls compassion." She gestured toward Jake. "He could have let me die. His people would have called it justice. Instead, he chose mercy." The hall erupted in murmurs, some supportive, others hostile. Jake watched delegates argue in languages he didn't recognize, their translator devices working overtime to convert passion into understanding. General Blake stood abruptly. "This is all very touching, but mercy doesn't win wars. These two have compromised military security, violated the rules of engagement, and undermined the chain of command. They should be court-martialed, not celebrated." "And yet," said High Justiciar Korvik of the Vorthik delegation, his massive form, imposing even seated, "their actions have accomplished what 12 years of warfare could not. They have created a path to dialogue." The debate raged for hours. Jake found himself answering questions he had never considered, defending choices he had made on instinct rather than calculation. Beside him, Zix faced similar scrutiny from her own people, many of whom viewed her survival as contamination by human influence. Finally, as the station's artificial day cycle began to dim, Admiral Kong called for order. "The question before this council is not whether Lieutenant Morrison and Warrior Zixthara broke regulations," she announced. "The question is whether their actions represent an opportunity for peace that we can afford to ignore." Ambassador Lixia of the Peaceful Coalition spoke next, her blue-tinged skin shimmering under the hall's lights. "The Galactic Accords require that any species demonstrating genuine capacity for interspecies empathy be given opportunity to resolve conflicts through mediation rather than destruction." Jake felt the room's attention focus on him again. "What does that mean exactly?" "It means," Admiral Kong replied, "that you and Zix have been selected to serve as the first interspecies mediation team in galactic history. If you can demonstrate that humans and Vorthik can work together, truly trust each other, then both species avoid classification as irredeemably hostile and potential exile from civilized space." The weight of responsibility hit Jake like a physical blow. "And if we fail?" General Blake's smile was cold as winter. "Then both species continue fighting until one or both are extinct. Those are the only options the galaxy will accept." Zix reached out with one of her 4 hands, her alien fingers surprisingly gentle as they touched Jake's shoulder. "We will not fail," she said simply. As the session adjourned, Jake realized that his simple act of mercy had grown into something vast and dangerous. The survival of 2 species now rested on whether a human soldier and a Vorthik warrior could prove that enemies could become allies. Looking at Zix, seeing determination in those compound eyes that had once filled him with fear, Jake felt something he hadn't experienced since the war began. He felt hope. The bond that saved 2 species 6 months after the trial. Jake Morrison and Zixthara stood before the rebuilt memorial on Kepler 442b, where their unlikely partnership had begun. The battlefield had been transformed into a garden where earth flowers grew alongside Vorthik crystal blooms. Their different biologies somehow finding harmony in alien soil. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had walked away? That day? Zix asked, her voice carrying the subtle harmonic undertones that her people used to express deep emotion. Jake touched the memorial stone, reading names of fallen soldiers from both species. Every day. But wondering doesn't change what is. Their mediation efforts had not been easy. For months, they had traveled between human and Vorthic territories, witnessing atrocities committed by both sides, listening to stories of loss and rage that seemed impossible to heal. There had been attempts on their lives, accusations of treason, and moments when even they doubted whether peace was possible. But slowly, gradually, their example had begun to spread. The first breakthrough came when a Vorthic medical unit responded to a distress call from a human colony ship, saving 300 civilians from a reactor failure. The second happened when human engineers helped repair a Vorthic farming station threatened by solar flares, preventing famine on an entire world. Each act of cooperation was small, but together they created something larger than either species had imagined possible, the foundation of trust. The Council has reached a decision, Admiral Kong announced through their communication device. Her image flickered slightly due to the distance, but her words were clear. The Galactic Confederation has voted to accept both humans and Vorthic as full members, with all rights and protections that entails. Jake felt tension he had carried for months finally released from his shoulders. What does that mean for the war? The war is over, Lieutenant. Officially ended as of this morning. Both species have agreed to the terms of the Morrison-Zix peace accords. The irony wasn't lost on Jake that a treaty named after a human soldier and a Vorthic warrior would be studied by historians for generations. He looked at Zix, seeing his own amazement reflected in her compound eyes. There's more, Admiral Kong continued. The Council has established a new branch of galactic service, the Interspecies Mediation Corps. They want you two to lead it. After the transmission ended, Jake and Zix walked through the memorial garden in comfortable silence. The artificial atmosphere processors hummed quietly, maintaining the delicate balance needed for both species plants to thrive. I never thanked you properly, Zix said suddenly. For what? For seeing me as a person instead of an enemy. For proving that mercy is not weakness, but the greatest strength any species can possess. Jake smiled, thinking of all the human soldiers and Vorthic warriors who are now working together on joint missions across the galaxy. You taught me something too. That enemies are just friends we haven't met yet. A year later, the Interspecies Mediation Corps had grown to include representatives from dozens of worlds. Jake and Zix had mediated conflicts between species that had been fighting for centuries, using their unique experience to show others that even the deepest hatred could be overcome. The method was always the same. Find the individual behind. The uniform, the person beneath the propaganda, the shared hopes and fears that transcended species boundaries. It didn't always work, but it worked often enough to change the galaxy's perspective on conflict resolution. Standing in his office, aboard the Corps' flagship, Jake read reports of successful mediations, peace treaties signed, and wars prevented. The walls were decorated with gifts from grateful species, crystal formations that sang in harmonious frequencies, flowering vines that glowed with bioluminescent beauty, and artwork that captured the diversity of galactic civilization. Emergency. Transmission coming in. Zix announced from the communication station. Her mobility had fully returned, and she moved with the fluid grace characteristic of her species. The message was from the Rigel sector, where two previously unknown species had made first contact by attempting to destroy each other. Their fleets were locked in battle, neither side able to communicate with the other, both convinced that they faced an extinction-level threat. Same story, different stars, Jake observed, already reaching for his equipment. Are you ready to save another galaxy? Zix asked, her tone light but her eyes serious. Jake checked his mediation kit, universal translators, medical supplies, negotiation protocols, and the one item he never left behind, his old rifle, now modified to fire non-lethal restraint. Charges. A reminder that peace sometimes required the threat of force to protect the innocent. "Let's go make some friends," he said, as their ship jumped to hyperspace, racing toward another conflict that might be resolved with words instead of weapons. Jake reflected on how much had changed since that day on the battlefield. He had been a soldier following orders, living in a universe divided by hatred and fear. Now he was something new, a bridge between worlds, a translator of hearts, a living proof that the impossible could become inevitable when someone chose. Compassion over convenience. The galaxy was vast, filled with thousands of species and countless opportunities for misunderstanding. But somewhere in that immensity, beings were learning that mercy was not just a human trait or a Vorthic weakness. It was the foundation of civilization itself. And it all began with one simple choice: to help someone in pain, regardless of who they were or where they came from. In the end, that choice had indeed shocked the galaxy, not because it was extraordinary, but because it was so fundamentally ordinary that anyone could make it. The question was, would they? The end.